Yeah. It's the first. It's the first. It's the first episode. It's the first. Might be your last.
But I'm looking for my first.
First episode podcast. Welcome to First Episode Podcast, a cherry popping debrief of your next binge-worthy television series. I'm your host, Motown Maurice.
I'm Atara G.
And I'm guest host Raj Jawa.
Today we're cherry popping Dune Prophecy.
10,000 years before the ascension of Paul Atreides, following two Harkonian sisters as they combat forces that threaten the future of humankind and establish the fabled sect that will become known as Ben Gesserit.
The genres are science fiction and fantasy.
Welcome back, First Episode Podcast. Happy New Year, prosperous New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is our first episode upon the new year since we last departed. How's everybody been doing?
Keeping my head above water.
Rain, temporary layoffs.
Good
I
time.
don't know what that is.
Oh man, Rod, you missing out. We missed out. We got to do a review of the classics, the retro
It
reviews.
was a good time.
Good times.
I remember the show. I don't remember that. Was that the theme song?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, lately when people have been asking me, how are you doing? I might just say, keeping my head above water.
Has anybody else been singing along afterwards?
Some do, some don't.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good, cool test.
The only theme song I remember that had a story was the Jeffersons theme song. Moving on up.
Moving on up.
To the east side. On that beat up apartment in the sky. We're moving on up.
Moving on up.
To the east side. And we finally got a piece of the pie. Come on, Raj.
Pie.
Oh, no. Bing dong burn in the
Extended cut.
on the grill.
Yeah.
Jump up on the matter. Get up there. Yeah. I know. We don't know.
We do need this classic review, I think. Yeah.
We don't know the words. We just
Hey, sometimes that's all you need is the rhythm, is the beat, is the flow. But 2025 is here, and we're doing another episode. 2024 ended pretty strong, just working on projects. That's all I did was edit. When Christmas hit, I got into a mindset of editing to release my new documentary, and it's coming along pretty well. What you been working on, Raj?
Not too much. I mean, I've been doing the gaming thing. I've been on a couple of other podcasts, like the Enigma Horror Podcast, which has been fun. Might be working on some film projects with Sai over there. Probably no to low budget type stuff. Still got the feature stuff going on. That's about it. I mean, everything else is kind of just taking up precedence. The feature, I would say, is kind of taking a lot of the bandwidth from everything else. But, big plans hopefully for the future as well. So just always cooking something.
You mentioned earlier about some reshoots. Is that like a dread? Or it's just like, hey, we got to do it to make it better.
Yeah, that's kind of just how it's got to go. It's sometimes what I realized, I think, in filmmaking is sometimes you have a artistic vision or idea, but a lot of the business is kind of more putting a puzzle together, like almost working backwards, you could say, of like, okay, what actor do we like? Oh, we like this actor. He's at this agency. What is this agency kind of looking for in terms of project? Or what kind of distributors work with this project or this territory? It's almost like putting the business plan together before you even worry about what the script is, because a lot of things might need to be reworked or retooled for the business, such as, we're going to put an Asian actor in here because we're going to have some animation, and this Asian actor is going to work with the, kind of anime style as well, and also push to that market. Or, so many things you wouldn't think of when you think of like, I wrote this genius script and I'm going to make it. Obviously there is that, but when you have an investment, when you have a product, essentially, the thinking becomes very different.
Yeah. Yeah, and is this something you're learning now throughout this process, or you kind of knew this before?
I mean, I wouldn't say I knew this before. I mean, I guess one would assume, but I think there's definitely a notion that, the film is kind of done once like a director has their say, their piece. You kind of assume every show on Netflix, I'm sorry, every movie on Netflix or whatever, any streaming platform, is the director's cut, or have you? But that's actually not usually the case. I'm sure a lot of directors would say like, "Oh, the producers are meddling," but I think it's a balance. You really have to balance the business interest with the artistic interest, and in that battle, someone's going to lose.
Yeah. I agree. Reshoots. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, Raj, but the very first shoot for the Late Night Experiment, we had to reshoot it.
I do remember.
That was devastating to me because Andre messed up the audio and my performance wasn't that great. I didn't find my character at the moment. And I remember watching the footage with Kevin Boot, just devastated. And he was just like, okay, we'll reshoot it. I was like, it kind of just like, it was an opening for me. We can actually reshoot it? Because in my mind is like, this is all we have. I have to make this work.
Sure.
But I embraced the idea, and I'm so thankful that we reshot it because it was not a good first shoot. And it's just a part of the process. So sometimes we don't always have the luxury of rehearsals.
Absolutely.
That's what we needed. But that shoot ended up being a rehearsal. So, yeah. Man, continued success with your reshoots. Thanks. And executive decision making with your film.
Yeah, thank you.
Atara, 2025 is upon us. How many countries are you going to visit this year?
Well, I'm going to Belize in February.
Nice.
Good start.
It's my sister's birthday, and she wants to go to Belize, so I have to oblige her, and I
have to. Like,
I
this is something
go.
that you just like a chore. It's probably your idea to go.
Well, I wouldn't say it was my idea, but I definitely wouldn't influence people I definitely encourage people to travel.
Any other countries you plan to go to this year?
I haven't thought about it, no.
Okay.
I'm still trying to get to Mexico City, though, so maybe I'll try that, work on that this year.
What about Arrakis? You plan to visit Arrakis maybe sometime this year? You was talking a lot about Arrakis earlier today.
That's a long trip without a little spice.
Dune Prophecy. Ooh. This one is a lot to unload. A lot didn't resonate with me because I'm not that versed in the Dune world. So I'm very happy to have you here, Atara. Because before we actually get into Dune Prophecy, I think we need to know a bit about the Dune universe.
Well, I will say I love the Dune universe. Firstly, because I'm a science fiction fan, and my brother and I have watched this movie so many times. And I did rewatch the 1980 film Dune, directed by David Lynch, before we watched the first Dune movie that came out. I haven't watched Dune 2. But I will say, watching this first episode of Dune Prophecy, which takes place 10,000 years before the 1984 Dune, is pretty exciting. I think if you watching this first episode, I don't think you have to know a lot about the Dune universe. And I could see how it can be confusing because there is a lot going on. And you said something earlier, Raj, before we started recording. You mentioned, and I was trying to I had this thought and I was trying to put it into words, and you said it perfectly. Dune Prophecy is basically Game of Thrones in space. Because I was saying to Motown that we've seen this kind of plot before, which is like, everybody vying for power. We see this all the time. But back to your original question about a little bit about the universe. Everybody wants to know about, let's start with the obvious things. Spice. What is spice? So spice is basically a psychedelic drug. It's used to create a psychedelic drug called melange, or however you want to say it.
Could I laugh and interrupt you a little bit?
Sure.
The comedy is finally sinking in right now. Remember, we were watching an episode of South Park?
Uh-huh.
I remember
I was laughing and you weren't because
Yeah.
I was getting all the Dune references and you weren't. Yeah.
the spice.
The spice.
Oh my goodness. I don't remember the football player's name, but they were parodying stealing this football player's poop.
And it was the spice. The poop.
Okay, so it's so
Yeah.
much funnier now.
Exactly,
Sorry to
right.
interrupt.
So, okay, and another interesting fact is spice comes from the planet Arrakis. And on the planet Arrakis, there's these huge worms. And spice is a byproduct of the life cycle of these worms. And like I said, spice is used to create this psychedelic drug called melange, which gives people special powers, special properties. One of them is which you spaceship pilots use them to navigate long distances. So it gives you special abilities, and they use it in navigation. They use it to tell whether people are. Some groups use it whether to tell people are telling the truth or not. Basically, it just gives you special abilities,
Heightened perception.
heightened
Yeah,
perception,
okay.
superpowers.
ability,
Yeah, however you want to refer to it as. So spice is being mined on planet Arrakis. And then the other thing we notice in Dune is, well, from Dune 1984, you don't really see it too much in this first episode. There's one instance where we saw it, and we could talk about that later, is we have certain characters have blue eyes. And normally that's associated with freemen. And freemen who live on Arrakis. They're not indigenous to Arrakis, but they've been on Arrakis for millennia. And when you're around spice and you ingest it a lot, one of the side effects is your eyes turn blue. So when you see someone with blue eyes, they've, either from Arrakis or they've been around spice so much and have ingested so much of it, their eyes turn blue.
Sure. Okay. So I was just gonna say they do a lot of drugs, or they live on Arrakis. Okay.
Or they live on Arrakis.
Yeah. Okay.
And so those are the two things: the spice, the planet Arrakis. And to talk about a little bit about the freemen, they live on Arrakis. You don't see they live within Arrakis, in the mountains of the Arrakis. They're hiding out. They're kind of ecological experts because Arrakis is a hard planet to live on. So they use spice to survive. They fight back against the desert by how they ecologically control the planet. They also hoard water. It's the water of life. So the Bene Gesserit, which in this first episode, we're just referring to them as the sisterhood. If you go back to the 1984 film, they're called the Bene Gesserit. And the sisters have to go through a ceremony where they drink the water of life. And if you survive, then you inherit the memories of all the emperor mothers before you. So that's how you become a leader of the Bene Gesserit. You drink the water of life. If you survive, you inherit the memories, and then now you're the emperor mother. And that's what I'm assuming Valia has done, that she's gone through the water of life. Because I think we did hear them refer to her as emperor mother, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Or Mother Superior of
Mother
all, yeah, I
Superior.
believe. Yeah.
I heard that one
Yeah.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they never try to kill the worms in this universe. Do they ever fight back against the worms?
May you fight back against the worms for survival, but you're not just out there trying to kill the worms. You're trying to exist with them because they're the source of the spice. No worms, no spice.
And worms eat anything?
Oh, I don't know what they eat, but I know you don't want a worm chasing after you.
They seem like they consume everything.
Yeah, like
but I
they
don't know if they
consume.
eat everything.
Yeah.
Per se. Well, can you like what does the Scarlac eat? In Star Wars, I think that's another question. I think whatever comes its way.
Exactly. Like a sperm whale, it's just big mouth scooping up whatever it can and then spitting out what it doesn't like.
Yeah, that was what Finding Nemo.
Yeah.
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 I think that was a good breakdown of the Dune universe.
Oh,
What
yeah.
do you think?
I agree.
You could probably go on Reddit and get much more, but I think for someone who hasn't watched the show or are not familiar with the show, you're going to want to know, like, oh, why are this person's eyes blue and what's the spice, and what's planet Arrakis. And I don't think any of these things have really come up in the first episode yet.
Yeah.
But they're eventually going to. I mean, they're more so part of the 1984 film.
Because this is 10,000 years before the 1980s. So there's so many little questions just to be asked. And I think we're ready to actually get into Dune Prophecy right now. For me, it wasn't exciting, and it's because I didn't know a lot of this information. For me, I would like to know more backstory, and I didn't have that until now. It's a show that you definitely have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of names, a lot of exposition. In some ways, it was dull. It didn't pick up until the second half, so I didn't completely enjoy it. I probably have to give it another watch before I can really enjoy it and watch further episodes. But I don't think it was a strong first episode. But tell me why you liked it, Atara.
I liked it because I know the backstory. I'm familiar with House Atreides. I'm familiar with House Harkonnen. Valia is from House Harkonnen, and she says in the very beginning, she went to find a new family to basically redeem her family's name that House Atreides had smudged by, writing a false history, which telling lies or writing a false history, which caused House Harkonnen to be, what is it? Not abolished, but banished.
Yeah.
Banished. So for me, right away, Valia has personal motives, to joining the sisterhood.
Absolutely. I mean, we've certainly seen that movie. I can't think of an example, but certainly the what was that space movie that I didn't really like? But there was a movie where I think it was Brad Pitt and I could be wrong about the actors, but was going to space even though it was really ill-advised, and everybody winds up dying except him, and I think he meets his father, who it's like, why did you come find me? Like,
the planet was being destroyed or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember, but similar, like he only did it for his legacy or for his own satisfaction.
Yeah.
He really didn't give a shit about anyone who died along the way or whatever. It was really like, I have to do this.
Yeah. She's clearly trying to clear her family's name. And a part of that plan is joining the sisterhood.
Precisely. Yeah. That makes sense.
What did you like or dislike about the first episode, Raj?
Well, I agree with you. It's slow. It is hard to follow all the names and families.
A lot, very hard.
I thought the exposition in the beginning was very good, but it needs 2 watches to really pick up on all of it. I mean, they start with the war against the machines, and you're already maybe it's just me, but you're trying to make connections to things, but when you have no idea what's going on, you're probably going in the wrong path, because you have no idea where this universe goes. Like I don't know anything about the machines. I really don't know anything about spice. I know it's a big thing in the universe. But yeah, all of this, and they're just dropping names on you. They're not like bringing high focus. It's like you're watching scenes of the war while she's literally telling you like, oh, Atreides was the one who was the hero, and they banished our family, and yada yada. All this is happening, and you have to really pay attention to it. So that's why I appreciate the exposition on the second watch. It really helped for at least the context you need for the episode. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just. It's not an easy watch. It's really deep and like political type intrigue. There doesn't seem like there may be some like action type sequence, but it doesn't seem like it. Seems like it's going to be a lot of like political vying for power. At least that's the way I'm seeing it right now.
And if we're going to compare this show to Game of Thrones, which as quoted in the beginning is like Game of Thrones of the space. Game of Thrones, I've had some of these problems with all the names initially watching, but there was a lot of shock value and interesting characters to draw you back in. I cared more about those characters. I am not really interested in any of these characters as of yet.
There's no good guy here. There's no one to root for. This is a empire that is ruled, the whole known universe is ruled by House Carino. And then you have all these other houses who are, doing all their maneuverings, trying to get favor. So everybody is out for themselves in this. There's no one who is truly trying to do what's best for the people, if we want to look at it that way.
You kind of see that in a few moments. You see, I think it's House Carino being like, "Well, you wouldn't be here if we didn't beat the machines." And you have the House Ricchisi. You see his kind of business sleaziness with the business meeting, and also impressing himself upon staying in the castle. To which I forget his name, but he's like, he's trying to make a fool of me. Like
that is the Emperor.
What's his last name?
Carino.
Oh, that's Carino. What's the so she's also a Carino, the woman that's like, you wouldn't be here if we didn't defeat the machines.
His wife?
Is that his wife? Okay.
Yeah. That's his wife.
See, it starts to get very like I lose track very quickly.
So it was that war with the machines was the Carino War.
Okay.
Right? Where they fought back the machines. And House Atreides out of that said, "Oh, the Harkonnens didn't come to fight, and they're cowards."
I see. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't necessarily that they were, or any of one was in power. It's necessarily that they, because Atreides wasn't necessarily in power, I guess, at the time, but they just were being the heroes of that war.
The hero, yeah.
Gotcha.
Something
Okay.
like that.
I'm going to just be honest. I didn't pick up any themes because I'm still struggling with the names and all these different things.
Power is definitely like a theme. Vying for power, positioning for power, vying for power, positioning for influence to get closer to power.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. I don't really have anything more. I'll even be able to like talk more about it as we talk about the second show for today. But yeah, that definitely is a theme there. The kind of political secrets, the espionage, the whole trying to vie for power. I think there's really no other better way to put it.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the most, especially in this first episode, that's the most clear thing that's being set up. Is everybody's the business guy's trying to get his interest in the
House Ricchisi.
Yeah.
Marrying off his 9-year-old.
Mm-hmm. It feels very, even from the war. Actually, you get the sense of this kind of. I don't know. There's probably a term for it, but like this medieval machismo. It's like the heroes are not like the most intelligent or whatever. It's who wins, and you see that one in the war, and then continuing on the with each one trying to curry favor. You see the kind of medieval. It harkens back to that time period of kings and queens.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we see that in The Witcher too. They have their truthsayers in The Witcher too, and they're trained at this facility. Then every house gets a truthsayer, and basically the leaders of these houses are maneuvered around a chessboard by their wizards, their truthsayers, their seers, whatever you want to call them.
Absolutely. I feel like we've seen something else before where the advisors were kind of the real power in something, and they like led a coup almost, but I can't think of something off the top of my head. I mean, you kind of see that in Lord of the Rings with Wormtongue, but that's kind of just a isolated.
Yeah, everyone has their advisor, so to speak.
Yeah.
I have a interesting snippet, Atara, that I want to read, and I'm looking forward to your response because she organically said something about what I'm about to read.
Okay.
This comes from Forbes. They did a little write-up about the show. Travis Fimmel is always a fascinating presence, though I have to question why an Australian actor continues his Ragnar Lookbrook accent in every show. Is he in fact Caleb from Raised by the Wolves, transported from the tragically canceled show to the deserts of Arrakis? And then he goes on to describe him as half-mad prankster with Viking voice.
The first words out of so Travis Fimmel, I watched him he played Ragnar in Vikings.
Okay.
Loved that show. to our audience, whoever's listening, if you're looking for something to binge watch, Vikings, excellent, excellent, excellent. So yes, so Travis Fimmel played Ragnar. I can't remember how to pronounce his last name. And this actor has a very distinct way of speaking and expressing himself. And so he comes into the throne room and he's walking over to Emperor Carino. And I'm like, oh, damn. Because I know what I'm going to get is Ragnar. The first words out of his mouth, that whole initial conversation, he sounded like Ragnar. And that's what I said. I was like, oh, damn. And then there he was. And that's because I'm the only one who could tell you the truth. I was like, oh, brother, here we go. He's not a bad actor. It's like he just acts the same.
That's the Desmond character, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Desmond Hart. Mm-hmm.
As soon as I saw him, I'm like, wait, is this Chris Hemsworth in Furiosa again, basically, because it seems very similar to that character. A little more eccentric, but yeah.
And he does play these eccentric characters, or they eventually turn eccentric, which we saw him do very quickly here.
Yeah.
He seems to have had, a spiritual experience with a worm and gained these special powers. And he also himself he may actually be the only character, if we think about freeing people from being under influence, he may be the only character that's trying to do that, but the fashion in which he's doing that is very violent.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand.
He freed the little boy at the end of the episode?
No,
freed him from life.
Freed him from arranged marriage. But he, clearly the sisterhood has influence over these houses to the point that they can't even make a decision without turning to ask the sisterhood what they think. Like when Desmond walks into the throne room and is talking to the emperor and says, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I survived because of this. It looks like it was an inside job, yada, yada, yada. Carino immediately turns and says, Kasha. He doesn't even try to absorb what was said himself or come to any kind of conclusion on his own. He immediately turns to Kasha. So they clearly have abandoned their own sense of intuition, and then we go through a few scenes later, Carino is out by the water, where they were doing that negotiation with House Richise, and then Desmond walks up and says, oh, what's the matter? And Carino is hemming and hawing, but ultimately he says, I don't feel good about this wedding. But he's ignoring his intuition. A lot of people aren't feeling good about this wedding. Kasha isn't. Carino isn't. They're all having something in their gut telling them this wedding is not a good idea, but no one's listening.
Right. Well, and they're working very hard to make Desmond look very suspicious.
Exactly.
And it may continue with what you've already said. Is like there's no good person in this show, so maybe Desmond's not even a good whatever. Maybe his intentions are bad. When we're talking about it, I was thinking of. I was like, what show was that? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's Game of Thrones. When the Jonathan Pryce religious sect took over for a bit. That might be Desmond's type of thing going on. Like, so yeah, we don't know if he's a good guy or bad guy, but it does seem like he's at least in touch with the and able to speak truthfully about the strangeness of this wedding. Mm-hmm. But we don't necessarily think or know he's a good guy.
No.
So something's up about him, maybe, but...
Well,
you said there isn't any good guys.
There's no good guys.
That's what I'm saying. It's probably possible he's not a good guy. Yeah, he has his own motive, but he's the best guy we have right now for the situation we're in.
Exactly. If there were going to be a good guy, I would think it would be him. But I mean, he's going around killing people, so
yeah.
Our children, actually.
Children.
Sorry for the. Spoilers.
It's a hard watch. The show has potential the more I hear Atara talk about the show.
Yeah, I agree.
if I was on my own, I wouldn't even give it a second chance. But because you're so passionate about the show, Atara, and the universe, and you're providing perspectives, I'm gonna watch again with you. For now, I'm giving it 2 cherries because I didn't really enjoy it. But it's often hard to judge a first episode, you know, and this is a tough one to judge.
Well, speaking of judging first episodes, I owe Silo an apology because, since we put out that podcast episode, I finished watching Silo. I said I was going to Cobra Kai it. I didn't. I binge watched that thing, and I can't wait to season 3.
Yeah, well, we still got to watch season 2.
Oh, season 2.
Yeah, we finished. Yeah, it got better. It was, it was slow in the beginning, but coming off of watching Severance on Apple TV, that got better slowly but surely. And Silo is quite interesting. A lot of mystery upon mystery upon mystery. And that's a fun watch. I'm not sure if we're gonna get the same out of Dune Prophecy, but
I think we are gonna get. We already have mystery out of Dune Prophecy. Yes, this is a formula we've seen before, right? We've seen this formula before. But what makes a show interesting when you're using the same formula over and over is the mystery. How do you bring about the mystery? Desmond is very interesting. Despite he sounds like Ragnarok from Vikings, what is he up to? He had a spiritual. He got swallowed up by a worm, and then spit up, and now has these special powers, and has asked for residency in the palace. Very interesting, Nez, the princess who's going to the sisterhood. Why does she want to marry a 9-year-old? Like, we know that God gives her a lot of time to rule on her own, but why is this what she wants? Is it because she knows the sisterhood wants to put her on the throne, and that's why she wants it? Because the sisterhood ultimately wants a sister on the throne, and that's why they're so interested in her. So there is a lot of mystery here. And then when they were at the club, when she and her brother went to the club, and she went up to the bar and she got those 2 vials of whatever that was. And then she walked over to that guy and she said, Atreides. That's when we're first introduced to House Atreides in this episode. So if that particular individual wasn't going to be important, they could have just put anybody in that position.
Right.
Talking about, seed finding purchase in a royal womb, it could be his seed that found purchase in her womb because they went and hooked up in the back room later on.
Always good to have a bastard son or whatever you want to call it in this case.
Exactly,
Yeah.
a Snow, a Jon Snow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly, So, and then why isn't Valia, when in the earlier part of the season when they were going over who was going to get a truthsayer or not, Valia says no to her own house. She's there trying to clean up their name, but then she won't give them a truthsayer. Why? I think because she wants to hold on to power. But, we've got a lot of mysteries here.
At first, I thought it was attached to breeding. So I'm like, okay. And then when you told me the explanation, I'm like, oh, they don't want to have her gain power. But maybe it's the same situation with a truthsayer. It's like now you have your own truthsayer. You kind of vying for your own house, your own power, what have you.
So she, as Emperor Mother, doesn't need a truthsayer in her own house, So I don't know. Valia, I don't trust her.
For sure. I think they're trying to get us to see her as the most honest, in essence. We at least kind of, I guess, see more of her intentions, but it's very possible she's lying about some of this stuff.
Oh,
you mentioned going into the birth index, but they didn't show us anything. It's very possible she saw something else.
She went in there, filed her nails, and then came back out and said, okay, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, we'll see. I think that's the thing. It is setting up for a lot of mysteries and probably a lot of intrigue, backstabbing, all kinds of stuff that we don't have any idea yet.
Who was that King Edward who killed all his wives? Anne of 1,000 Days. Did you ever see that movie?
It sounds familiar, but I don't think I saw it.
She was married to King Edward, and he had her head chopped off. But it's just that same kind of thing. A lot of maneuvering and machinations and, just for power.
Sure.
It's interesting. I would say if you're going to watch this show, watch 1984 film first. Don't even bother with these new ones. Just go watch the 1984 and then get right into the series. If you're planning on watching the series,
And it's a good time in remembrance of David Lynch having just passed as well.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, surprisingly enough, when his film came out, it was considered a box office failure.
Oh, and he took his name off of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just, it's like, that's such a shame because it did so well in later years.
Absolutely.
I think
Did he put his name back on it?
Yeah, I think he improved it. He made like a director's cut or what have
Yeah.
you.
They call it Gateway to Heaven to Gateway to Science Fiction Heaven or something like that.
What's that?
That's how they refer to the 1984 Dune.
That's a reference, not the name.
As a reference. It got popular afterwards, and then they started referring to it as Gateway to Science Fiction Heaven, or something like that.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting how that kind of stuff. Like, what do you mean by gateway, though? I guess before I say what I was going to say, what do you mean by gateway to science fiction?
Kind of like the path to great science fiction films.
So almost like homage, or a lot of films are paying homage or taking that. Because I was just shown the trailer for Johnny Mnemonic. And I was like, how much of The Matrix is basically this movie? And yet it came out so much, quite a bit before The Matrix came out. I think there was even a lawsuit about it. But to that, it was that close. But it's interesting. And it was even Keanu Reeves, which I think people say that was almost the prototype for him getting Matrix as his role.
Yeah. The 1984 film, it has a lot of Middle East, and I read somewhere that it's heavily influenced by the Middle East and Muslim culture, You
can see that in the music for sure.
And imperialism, and one person, controlling all these people, which is kind of like, does that sound familiar? For current times, but it's interesting how everything is cyclical. Themes are always cyclical.
Yeah.
So what's your entertainment potential, Raj and Cherries?
I want to give this episode, I'm probably unfortunately going to give it a 1.5, and that's only because I was bored. It was painful to watch the first time. I think if I only made it through a little bit on a second rewatch. But the second rewatch of what I saw, I'm like, okay, now I understand it. Like, it requires to watch. Maybe if you already know the universe, it doesn't. But having this is my first Dune anything, really, it required that double explanation, or at least that doubling down on all this, because it's dumping a lot of information on you very fast.
Yeah, I didn't say my cherries, but so I'm going to say 2.5.
2.5, okay.
2.5, only because it's a disservice to the universe by how they did this first episode. Like, if you don't like science fiction and you've never been into the Dune universe before, this isn't going to keep you.
This is not going to convince you to watch.
This is probably going to repel you.
You'll probably, I mean, if you're anything like me, and I don't know if many people are, but like I was ready to turn it off. I'm like, I have to watch this for the podcast. I can't not watch it.
Yeah.
But I probably would not have continued.
Yeah.
I would have been like, this is too deep. This is there's characters, there's this and that. And it doesn't give me a good reason to want to watch.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
I will say it's a beautiful universe.
Little pale, little saturated, desaturated, but
yeah.
Yeah.
It certainly stimulated good conversation.
Yeah.
I'm a Dune universe fan, so
got some good passion. It got passion out of you, Atara. So.
It's also a very nostalgic film for me.
Nice.
The title is Dune Prophecy. The release date, Sunday, November 17th, 2024. There's currently one season with a total of 6 episodes.
The average episode duration is 1 hour. It is on the HBO Max, or just Max Network. The IMDb rating currently is 7.3 out of 10, and the average tomato score on Rotten Tomatoes is 70%.
Well, after a hugely successful season 1, HBO Max has announced that a season 2 is coming.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I mean, it seems like even the movies, the new movies seem to be pretty popular. So I haven't seen them, but it makes sense that people would, clamor for this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always trying to milk whatever's popular.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to let this jump the shark for sure.
Yeah. Hopefully they don't let Fallout jump the shark. That's all I'm hoping. That's all I'm just hoping to keep.
Those are our thoughts on Dune Prophecy.
Thank you for trusting us.
We are honored to be your first.
For information about this podcast and more, please visit motamarice.com.